The housing there, it was a little different. Not like I said, not like as developed as Singapore. There were still flats. In my first area in Miri, we rarely saw flats, or at least I rarely saw flats. I don't remember seeing any flats, like apartment complexes, sorry. They were kind of houses like this, and they just had like cement fences. It was like someone just took like just the grid and just put some, cement sectioned out areas, and then you just put a house in it. That's kind of what it was. Some houses were bigger than others. Sometimes the houses were run down, but not really much of anything. You kind of see that kind of decay in a tropical environment, just because the humidity and everything kind of wears down stuff. We'd typically go knock doors or gates. We'd have like a coin or our keys or something, and we tap on the gate because you can't get to the door. We tap on the gate and just, ask if anyone's home in English or Malay or something like that, and try and contact them that way. Sometimes they'd open the door. Sometimes they would go like this, which generally meant didn't want, or like no want, which was kind of funny because they would do it with their hands sometimes, and just like to emphasize that they didn't want to hear anything. Sometimes though, they're quite fun. They were really fun to talk to, and the weather there is just the same as Singapore. Quite hot and a lot of rain. You get used to being wet. We typically would put our Books of Mormon and pamphlets and things like that in a plastic bag. I fortunately had a backpack that had like a rain fly. I would just put on the top, keep everything dry, but that would be all it was dry. If it rained, you were soaked from head to toe, and it would rain hard a lot of the time. Not like rain you'd see in Utah, it rains kind of light for like 5 minutes. No, it's like someone dumped a bucket. It's pretty heavy there. The people, there's lots of different people. We would generally run into, at least in East Malaysia, we would generally run into Ibans. And a lot of them we would find as we were contacting around construction sites. They would have these wooden shacks that would build out of plywood. The employer would let them, build that right there. And we'd go door to door and talk to them. That's where a lot of our investigators come from. They were quite humble people, very friendly people. They didn't have a lot, and they would still share with us. I remember oftentimes we would be fed fish that they didn't really have means to go buy, so they'd fish it out of the ditch, and then they would, still give it to you. It'd probably been the only fish they had caught for like 2 or 3 days or something, and they would still feed it to you. They're very nice, very humble people. One thing that is very popular in Malaysia, both east and west, is oil. You've heard of the Petronas Towers. That's in West Malaysia. That's in the peninsular Malaysia. Petronas Towers, it's oil. That's what they deal with. In Miri, they have the oil rigs out there. They have a lot of natives that go out and work on the drills. That's a big thing there. Another thing that's big is palm oil, which is in a lot of products that we use. I believe it's in a lot of plastics, and sometimes they use it in food. I'm not sure if they do, but it's just very versatile. And so they have huge palm fields in West Malaysia and East Malaysia. So that's a big market there. Cost of living in Malaysia is significantly cheaper than Singapore. Singapore, they use the Sing dollar, and that's like one Sing dollar is like 75 cents US. In Malaysia, they use ringgit, and that's, when I was there, it was like 3 ringgit to $1 US. So it was, it was cheaper. I don't know how much the housing would be. It wasn't much of an issue. I think it'd be like 600, 700, maybe even a little higher ringgit a month to rent the house that we were in. Food, you could spend 50 ringgit a week, at least I did anyway, on food. Maybe even 50 ringgit every 2 weeks. And that's, that's about 30-ish US dollars. So, it's quite cheap for Americans anyway. But the work, they still got paid I don't know how you would say it. Like, it's not like they would get paid a whole lot of money. You know, they would still get paid compared. Like, you make 50 ringgit a week. That's all you get. You know, it's not like super expensive. They don't get a whole lot of ringgit and then can just use it on anything. It's cost of living is cheaper. That's because you get paid less. You know, food is cheaper. It's because you get paid less. It just doesn't cost as much. You know, they're not making huge amounts of money. Some maybe. Most of the people that we dealt with weren't exactly stellar, like super rich. They were modest and decent houses, and they had modest jobs. Some of them were laborers, like the Ibans I had mentioned, and they would a lot of times rarely make a whole lot. You know, they'd make enough to buy food, the food necessary for that week or that month. A lot of them didn't have enough money to even get a bus ticket to come to church. Some areas were a little poverty-stricken. In Malaysia, you'll see a lot of tin shacks, typically built around swamps, or I don't know if the swamps form after they're there, or they just build them there. They build them on stilts, and it's kind of an adventure to go see them. They're really fun. They're very, very, very modest, very simple houses. They just build themselves. A lot of them have trails that lead out to them, or boardwalks that are probably about a foot wide, and maybe, depending on how deep the water is, maybe a couple feet high. You know, and it's me. I was a big guy, still am a big guy, but I mean, it was kind of scary because you walk on these old boards and you would hear them creak, and you know, you'd have to walk on the junction or whatever, so that you didn't actually break through the board and then go into the nasty swamp water or anything. That happened to a few people, but it was always an adventure going out there. You know, it was very beautiful. You know, as beautiful as tin shacks can be, they were actually quite breathtaking to look at sometimes. The country was beautiful itself, and then you get, you know, light at the right angle. You know, you'd see the sun going down, and then, you know, there's just a whole bunch of green, and then you had this old shack out there, and it would look really pretty. Didn't smell pretty, but it was still fun. You know, swamp water anywhere really doesn't smell pretty, but it was always an adventure. It was always kind of fun. It was in quite contrast to other places. You know, you'd be in what looked like third world, you know, walking over dirty water, knocking on these little shacks, just trying to, you know, talk to anybody. And a lot of them you would talk to. They were very friendly. Like I said, they would give you anything. They'd always bring out this drink. The brand was Bingo, but they'd always bring it out, you know, and I'd always be very grateful to get it because it was always hot outside, you know, and they knew that, and they would give you as much as they had. They'd give you all these crackers. They'd give you whatever they needed. So the Malaysians, the Ibans, in the more humble parts of town, are very, very nice, very, very hospitable to everyone. Transportation was a lot more difficult in Malaysia. In East Malaysia, we rode bikes, at least in Miri. I think in all of East Malaysia, all the areas there, Cebu, Kuching, everywhere you would ride a bike. West Malaysia was a little more organized, if you could say organized. They had buses and taxis, but it was kind of hard to get around. They just weren't scheduled very well. So you could wait anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours waiting for a bus to get somewhere. And so it was very hard to travel by bus. And sometimes, like in KL, that's all you could do. It was too dangerous to ride a bike because there's too many cars and just not enough road space to ride a bike. So you'd have to ride a bus or take a taxi. So that was kind of unfortunate, just trying to get anywhere. At least in KL. In Ipoh, we rode a bike. Ipoh's in West Malaysia as well. When I was able to ride a bike, it was a lot easier. Depending on where you're at, you kind of adapt to it and you get used to it. Sometimes you have to plan your appointments with investigators or members around transportation. There's a lot of cockroaches. Sometimes they'd get in your house, and you'd have these little tennis racket zapper things. Those came in handy whenever you found a cockroach. Some of them would be pretty big. They had monitor lizards, or biawak, is what they'd call it in Malay. Sometimes when you're in East Malaysia, they'd fly one of those things up, and they'd feed you lizard, or you'd get big snakes. You'd rarely come across that kind of stuff. I think I had seen 1 or 2 monitor lizards while I was there, like outside of the zoo. There's wildlife, but in the places that you're at least in West Malaysia, you rarely see it. East Malaysia, you're more likely to see it, just because it's a little more underdeveloped and there's more forest and stuff there. You would definitely hear call to prayer everywhere you're at. I don't quite remember hearing it a whole lot in Singapore. Depends on if you're close to a mosque or not. They don't project it very loudly there. West Malaysia and East Malaysia, you would definitely hear it. Sometimes I wouldn't hear it because it would happen all the time. You naturally kind of like tone it out. But I honestly really liked it. Sometimes you'd get someone up there that it was very good. The call to prayer is someone up there just speaking into a mic. It's not pre-recorded. There's someone actually up there in the tower, singing these prayers, and the call to prayer. Or they're giving a sermon, and sometimes it is very beautiful. I liked listening to it. Sometimes you'd be like right there and it'd just boom, it'd go off and it'd be hard to hear anything. And he'd be going for 15, 20 minutes and you're trying to teach somebody. But, it was still worth it. I liked it a lot. You'd definitely hear call to prayer. Places to visit in Malaysia. There's several mosques that you can go visit. There's big mosques, which are kind of fun to go see. And I think, anyone should really go see them. It doesn't mean you're converting to Islam or anything, and they don't expect that. They're like, yeah, you come see our church, that's fine. Just like we want people to see our church. And they're just very nice people. They're very accommodating. The mosques are very beautiful. A lot of them are big. They're very ornate. They have huge rooms in them. It's just really nice to look at. There's other places in Malaysia. Petronas Towers is a good a tourist attraction. There's a place next to the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur called Pasar Seni, which is a huge market. Goes on every day of the week. I don't know how long, but sometimes we'd go there. We'd just go like to buy like a watch or something. We needed a watch or food. You get food at the markets there, and sometimes they would try and sell you like shoes or something expensive at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they tell you that you're the first customer, which is always fun. And you're like, oh, I'm the first customer, right? And so they try and give you a deal. It's like, you've been open for 24 hours. How am I your first customer? It's just because we're white, they think that we don't understand what they're saying. So a lot of the time they'll speak Malay, and they'll talk about you, which is always fun to kind of like bust up the conversation. They'll keep talking about you, and then you just kind of throw in something. They're like, oh, okay. They kind of realize it's fun to watch them. But then you can just joke around with them. Oh, there's just a lot of tourist sites. You can always find something. There's Buddhist temples. You can go to Tamil temples, the Hindu temples, sorry. There's one in KL called Batu Caves. You walk up like 750 stairs to get to this big cave, and they have paintings all in the inside, and they have their statues and stuff like that. It's very pretty to look at, and there's a lot there, which is nice. So you can really go see anything in Malaysia. There's always places to go.